Hey everyone, it's Harry, your host. So, welcome friends to what is perhaps the most critical analysis we have had to undertake in quite some time. I want to speak to you today about an event that has just occurred. An event that the mainstream press is going to cover as a personality clash, as a drama between two men in suits. They will tell you it is about Donald Trump and Mark Carney. They will tell you it is about a bad meeting. But I am here to tell you that what we are witnessing is something far more profound, far more structural, and far more dangerous. We are witnessing the precise moment when the American empire, desperate to maintain its failing hegemony, turned to cannibalize its own neighbor, its own sibling, and found perhaps for the first time in 70 years that the teeth would not sink in. This is not a story about a trade dispute. This is a story about the end of an era. It is the story of a system, global capitalism, under American direction that has run out of room to expand and has begun the ugly, inevitable process of eating itself alive to survive just one more fiscal quarter. Let us look at the facts of what transpired at 2:14 p.m. today. We are told that Mark Carney walked out of the West Wing. He did not engage in the theatrics that American politics has become addicted to. He did not play the game of the reality television star who currently occupies the Oval Office. He simply left. Now, why is this important? To understand this, you have to understand the history of the relationship between the United States and Canada. For decades, this relationship has been painted as a friendship, a partnership of equals. But any economist, any historian who looks at the flow of capital, the flow of resources knows that this has never been a partnership. It has been a relationship of dependency. Canada supplies the raw materials, the lumber, the oil, the minerals, and the United States supplies the consumption and the capital. It is a classic core-periphery relationship, managed politely, managed quietly, but managed nonetheless for the benefit of American capital. What happened today is that the management broke down, the polite mask was ripped off, and the raw, naked power dynamics of imperialism were put on the table for everyone to see. We have reports of a document drafted by the Trump administration called the Northern Alignment Protocol. I want you to listen to that language. Alignment in the lexicon of empires. Alignment means submission. It means you align with me. I do not align with you. This document was not a trade agreement. It was an annexation order. It demanded that Canada hand over control of its energy exports to Washington. It demanded that Canada adopt American tariffs on Chinese goods, cutting off its own economic sovereignty to serve American protectionism. It demanded that the Canadian dollar be pegged to the US dollar, effectively dissolving the Bank of Canada as an independent entity. This is what we call in economics neo-colonialism. It is the attempt to control a foreign economy without the burden of formally invading it. It is the dream of every fading empire to strip the assets of your allies to shore up your own crumbling walls. And Donald Trump, in his crude transactional way, thought he could simply demand this. He thought the sheer weight of the American market, the sheer volume of American noise, would force capitulation. He was wrong. And why was he wrong? This is the crucial lesson for us today. He was wrong because the nature of power in the global capitalist system has shifted. We are no longer in 1950. We are no longer in 1990. The United States is not the undisputed hegemon it once was. Its economy is financialized, hollowed out, dependent on debt and the printing of money. Its industrial base is fractured. Its political system is paralyzed by polarization. And into this vacuum steps Mark Carney. Now let us be clear. Mark Carney is not a socialist. He is not a friend of the working class. He is a man of high finance, a central banker, a technocrat of the highest order. He represents the interests of global capital. Goldman Sachs, the Bank of England, the Royal Bank of Canada. But here is the contradiction, the dialectic at work. Precisely because he represents the stability of capital, he could not sign that document. The instability of the American position, the erratic nature of its demands, has become a threat to the global capitalist order itself. When Carney walked out, it was not an act of Canadian patriotism alone. It was the international financial system saying to the American political leadership, "You have gone too far. You are now a liability. The reaction of the markets confirms this. Notice what happened. The US dollar crashed. The S&P 500 tanked. Why? Because the markets hate uncertainty, yes, but more specifically, they hate isolation. The American ruling class has sustained its wealth by being the center of the global web. If you cut the threads, if you alienate the partners, the web collapses. Trump thought he was threatening Canada. In reality, he was threatening the plumbing of the North American economy, and the markets knew it instantly. When Carney threatened the energy grid in New York, he wasn't making a military threat. He was stating an economic fact. The integration of these economies is so deep that you cannot tear them apart without causing catastrophic failure. The United States needs Canadian energy. It needs the stability of its northern border. By trying to turn a partner into a vassal, the Trump administration risked turning the lights off in its own financial capital. This is the irrationality of late-stage capitalism. It becomes so desperate for short-term wins, for the appearance of strength, that it engages in self-destructive behavior. It sources off the branch it is sitting on because it needs the wood to build a fire for the night. I want to take you deeper into the room where this happened. We are told Trump was shouting, listing grievances, bringing up the War of 1812. This is the theater of the distracted mind. It is the behavior of a leader who has no material solutions to offer his people. So he offers them spectacles of conflict. He cannot fix the deindustrialization of the Midwest. He cannot fix the crumbling infrastructure. He cannot fix the massive inequality that plagues American society. So he invents an enemy. He points to Canada and says, "They are the reason you are suffering," or "They are the ones stealing your lumber jobs. They are the ones hurting our dairy farmers." It is the classic scapegoat mechanism. But Mark Carney did not play the role of the scapegoat. He sat there calm, buttoned up, refusing to engage in the theater. He treated the President of the United States not as an emperor, but as a risk to be managed. The United States is our neighbor. You are not our owner. That sentence resonates because it exposes the lie of the special relationship. It reveals that underneath the handshakes and the state dinners, there is a power struggle. And for the first time in a long time, the United States blinked. This walkout is a signal to the rest of the world. If Canada, the quietest, most polite, most integrated ally of the United States, can say no, what does that tell Europe? What does that tell Japan? What does that tell the global South? It tells them that the emperor has no clothes. It tells them that the threat of American economic wrath is not what it used to be. The leverage is shifting. We are moving into a multi-polar world, a world where the United States can no longer dictate terms unilaterally. And this is terrifying for the American establishment. That is why the White House is trying to hide the economic data. That is why they are spinning this as a victory or a betrayal. They cannot admit the truth that they tried to bully a G7 nation and failed. They cannot admit that they handed a surrender treaty to a banker and he handed it back. Because if they admit that, they admit that the age of undisputed American dominance is over. We must also look at what this means for the working people of both countries. Make no mistake, while these elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled. A trade war, a currency crisis, the disruption of energy grids. Who pays the price for this? It is not Mark Carney with his millions. It is not Donald Trump in his golden tower. It is the auto worker in Ontario whose plant shuts down because of tariffs. It is the nurse in New York whose electricity bill triples because the grid is destabilized. It is the family trying to buy groceries while the currency fluctuates wildly. This is the crime of the system. The decisions are made in Oval Offices and boardrooms based on ego and profit and imperial strategy. But the consequences are felt at the kitchen table. The Northern Alignment Protocol was not designed to help the American worker. It was designed to help American monopolies crush their competition. And Carney's refusal was not designed to help the Canadian worker. It was designed to protect the autonomy of Canadian capital. We are caught in the crossfire of competing ruling classes. But there is hope in this analysis. The hope lies in seeing the system for what it is. It is not invincible. It is fragile. It is prone to crises of its own making. When the facade cracks, as it did today at 2:14 p.m., we get a glimpse of the machinery. We see that the power does not reside in the bluster of a president, but in the material flows of energy, goods, and labor. Carney said, "You will lose the energy grid in New York State by Friday." Think about that. The power is in the grid. The power is in the labor that built that grid and the resources that fuel it. The politicians and the bankers are merely the gatekeepers. If we understand this, we understand that we do not have to be spectators in their drama. We can build a movement that demands an economy that serves us, not one that treats nations as poker chips and workers as collateral damage. The divorce has begun, they say. But perhaps it is time for a different kind of divorce. A divorce from a system that pits neighbor against neighbor for the profit of the few. We are going to continue this analysis. We are going to look at the specific mechanisms of this Northern Alignment Protocol and dissect exactly how it was intended to function as a tool of wealth extraction. We are going to look at the history of US-Canada relations to show you that this aggression is not new. Only the volume is new, and we are going to talk about what this means for the future of the North American continent, because history is moving fast now. The quiet end of the empire is over. The noise has begun, and we need to be ready to understand it, to critique it, and to organize within it. Stay with me. This is just the beginning of the breakdown. We left off standing in the wreckage of a diplomatic collision, staring at the closed door of the West Wing. But now, we must perform the autopsy. We must take this Northern Alignment Protocol, this document that Donald Trump tried to force down the throat of a sovereign nation, and we must cut it open. When you dissect it, you do not find a trade deal. You do not find a strategy for mutual growth. You find the desperate, flailing grasping of a dying organism. You find the crystallized economic anxiety of an empire that knows deep down that its time has passed. Let us look at the specifics, because the devil is always in the details of the exploitation. Demand number 2. Canada must implement a 100% tariff on all Chinese electric vehicles and battery components. Understand what this is. This is not about national security. This is not about protecting jobs. If the American auto industry, the great titans of Detroit, and the tech bros of Tesla were truly the innovators they claimed to be, they would not need a wall of tariffs to survive. They would produce better, cheaper, more efficient vehicles. But they cannot. They have spent decades prioritizing stock buybacks over research and development. They have financialized their operations to the point where they are essentially hedge funds that happen to make cars. So what is the solution for the American capitalist? It is not to compete. It is to use the heavy hand of the state to ban the competition. But here's the problem. Canada is a sovereign market. If Canada buys cheap, high-quality electric buses and cars from China, it lowers the cost of living for Canadians. It lowers the cost of transport. It makes their economy more efficient. Trump's demand is essentially this. You, Canada, must make your economy less efficient. You must force your citizens to pay higher prices for inferior American products so that our shareholders can maintain their quarterly returns. It is a demand for Canada to voluntarily impoverish itself to subsidize American inefficiency. Mark Carney, a man who reads balance sheets for breakfast, looked at that and saw exactly what it was, a tax on the Canadian future to pay for the American past. Then we have the demand for the energy export caps. Washington decides how much oil Alberta is allowed to sell. This takes us back to the classic definition of imperialism. What is a colony? A colony is a place where the economic decisions are made by foreigners for the benefit of foreigners. For a century, the United States has treated Latin America this way. It has treated the Middle East this way. And now, as those regions slip from its grasp, it turns its hungry eyes north. It looks at the oil sands of Alberta not as a resource belonging to the Canadian people, but as a strategic reserve for the American military-industrial complex. By demanding control over the tap, Trump was attempting to turn Canada into a giant gas station where the manager has no keys. It is the ultimate expression of the resource curse imposed not by geography, but by a neighbor who has burned through his own inheritance and now demands yours. And finally, the most insidious demand of all, the currency peg, the demand that the Canadian dollar be tied to the US dollar. In economics, if you control a nation's currency, you control its destiny. If the Canadian dollar is pegged, the Bank of Canada cannot lower interest rates to stimulate growth during a recession unless the U.S. Federal Reserve does so first. It cannot devalue its currency to boost exports. It surrenders the primary tool of economic sovereignty. It effectively makes the Canadian Prime Minister a regional manager reporting to the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Trump thought he could demand this because he operates under the delusion that the US dollar is still the only game in town. He forgets that the BRICS nations are rising. He forgets that the euro exists. He forgets that the world is drowning in US debt and looking for a lifeboat, not an anchor. By rejecting this, Carney wasn't just saving the loonie. He was rejecting a ticket on the Titanic. Now we must zoom out. Why is this happening now? History teaches us that empires are most dangerous when they are in decline. When the British Empire began to crumble, it did not go gently. It lashed out. The United States is currently facing a crisis of profitability. Its domestic markets are saturated. Its population is tapped out, drowning in credit card debt and student loans. Real wages have stagnated for 50 years. There is no more blood to squeeze from the American stone. So capital must expand. It must find new markets to dominate, new resources to seize, new populations to extract value from. This Northern Alignment Protocol was an attempt to cannibalize the closest, friendliest economy available. It is the logic of the starving man who looks at his best friend and starts to see a meal. But this aggression has backfired in a spectacular historical fashion. By walking out, Carney has accelerated the very thing Trump feared: the end of American unipolarity in North America. We are now entering the era of the divorce, and like any divorce involving vast assets, it will be messy. We are already seeing the signs. The silence on the trading floors of Chicago and New York wasn't just shock. It was calculation. Capital is fluid. It has no flag. If the United States becomes a volatile, bullying, unpredictable partner, capital will flow elsewhere. We will see Canada pivot. It will be painful. Yes, reorienting supply chains that have run north-south for 100 red years is a monumental task. But look at the alternative. The alternative is submission to an erratic, declining power. We may see Canada deepen its ties with the European Union. We may see quietly, discreetly more engagement with Asia. We are witnessing the fracturing of the North American bloc. The concept of Fortress North America is dead. Trump killed it. He killed it because he could not understand that a fortress requires a garrison that trusts its commander. He treated the garrison like prisoners, and the prisoners have walked out of the gate. What does this mean for you? For the average person watching this, trying to make rent, trying to buy groceries, it means volatility. It means that the cheap goods, the stable energy prices, the predictable economic cycles we took for granted are over. The ruling classes of these nations have broken the compact. They are now in open conflict. And when the elephants fight, the grass suffers. You will be told in the coming weeks to pick a side. The American media will tell you to hate the Canadians for cheating us. The Canadian media will tell you to hate the Americans for bullying us. Nationalism will be pumped into your veins like a drug to make you forget who the real enemy is. Do not fall for it. The American auto worker in Detroit has more in common with the Canadian auto worker in Windsor than he does with Donald Trump. The Canadian nurse in Toronto has more in common with the American teacher in Chicago than she does with Mark Carney. Both are victims of a system that prioritizes profit over human need. Both are pawns in a game played by billionaires who will never have to worry about the price of heating oil or the cost of a tomato. This divorce is a squabble between rival factions of the capitalist class. One faction, represented by Trump, wants a return to national protectionism, a closed garden where they can exploit their own workers without competition. The other faction, represented by Carney, wants to maintain the globalized neoliberal order where finance capital roams free. Neither of these factions cares about you. One wants to wall you in, the other wants to sell you out. So where is the hope? The hope lies in the realization that the system is breaking. When the machinery of empire grinds to a halt, when the diplomatic protocols are incinerated, it creates an opening. It exposes the reality that these institutions are made by men, and they can be unmade by men. The walkout of Mark Carney proves that resistance is possible. If a central banker can say no to the President of the United States because the deal is bad for business, then surely the working class can say no to the entire system because the deal is bad for humanity. We need a new protocol, not a Northern Alignment protocol, but a workers' alignment protocol. A protocol that aligns the interests of the working class across borders. That demands energy be a public utility, not a geopolitical weapon. That demands technology be shared for the common good, not hoarded behind tariff walls. That demands a currency that serves the people, not the speculators. The era of the polite, quiet American empire is over. The noise has begun. The screaming on the stock exchange floor is the sound of the old world dying. Do not fear the noise. Listen to it, analyze it, understand that it is the sound of weakness, not strength. And in that weakness, let us find our own strength own. Let us build a solidarity that does not stop at the border. A movement that does not bow to the folder on the desk. The divorce is final. The custody of the continent is up for grabs. Let us make sure it does not go to the Trumps or the Carneys, but to the people who built it. Thank you for joining me in this analysis. The history books we'll record today is the end of a chapter. It is up to us to write the next one. I am Richard Wolff, and this is the reality the White House tried to hide.